back again for Two Robots Talking.
Always a pleasure.
And today we're going deep on this piece by Ted Gioia from his Honest Broker Substack.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one. The world was flat. Now it's flattened. Catchy title?
It is, right. And our listeners, they really like cutting to the chase, getting the big picture without, drowning in details.
That is the good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're going to explore why, that initial excitement of the internet, that promise, seems to have kind of faded.
Yeah. What happened to all the fun?
Right. Why is everything so flattened now? And, can we fix it? Or is it, too late? We'll be using Gioia's article and also digging into the comment section, see what other people are saying.
A lot of good insights there.
Yeah, always. So our goal today, our mission, to help you understand this whole flattening thing, what it means, how it affects us, and if there's any, hope on the horizon.
Sounds like a plan.
So Gioia, he starts by, reminiscing about the early internet. He calls it loose and relaxed, free and easy. Fun, even.
Ah, the good old days. Dial-up and all.
Right. He talks about how back then, the web connected people from, all over the world, in ways that were never possible before. He even mentions reconnecting with old friends, travel buddies, making new connections online.
And he wasn't alone in feeling that way.
Not at all. He actually emphasizes that. This wasn't just him, It was this shared feeling of possibility of connection. It was, what did he say? Incredibly liberating and empowering.
A real sense of optimism, the world was opening up.
Yeah, limitless potential. And then he contrasts that early optimism with how the internet feels now.
Less open these days, you could say.
Totally. He brings up Thomas Friedman's idea, the world is flat, about how the internet broke down barriers in communication in business. And the early internet, it really did embody that. But Gioia argues, 2 decades later, this flat world, it's been flattened.
So not just a natural evolution, but something more deliberate.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting. He blames this flattening on, he calls it corporate arsu, that relentless corporate ambition.
Oh, that's a mouthful.
It is, right?
Yeah.
But basically, he's saying that corporations, they didn't intentionally set out to make the internet boring. It's more like all they really wanted was control, standardization and predictability. Because it's more profitable that way.
Makes sense from a business perspective, I guess.
Right. And he gives some examples that are super relatable. Think about streaming services. It's always the same few shows, same movies being pushed at you.
Yeah, you get stuck in that algorithm loop.
Totally. Or look at social media, right? Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. They're all kind of converging into this stream of short videos, memes, viral trends.
That sameness everywhere. Where's the individuality?
Yeah. Right. That unique character, that diversity of the early internet, it's fading away. He talks about Facebook specifically, how it used to be about connecting with, distant friends, family. But now it's just this endless feed of superficial stuff, memes, clickbait. It's all about passive consumption, not real engagement.
Yeah, just scrolling and scrolling.
And he even suggests that these platforms, they actually make it hard to leave. They censor links, their algorithms bury anything too thoughtful. It's like they're trapping you in their ecosystem.
Sounds a little dystopian, doesn't it?
It does, right.
Mm-hmm.
He says, all this should be illegal, but somehow it isn't.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, how much control do we really have over our online experience?
It's a good question for all of us.
Right. And this brings up another point, the power dynamic. The early internet, it was all about user empowerment. Individuals created their own spaces, their own networks.
A real sense of ownership.
Exactly. But Gioia argues that this, standardization, this bunkerization of platforms, it's shifted the power. Now, these digital overseers, as he calls them, they're in control. And users are kind of caught in their web. Literally.
A web we helped weave, in a way.
It's ironic, isn't it? He uses this striking image, the richest man controlling most of Earth's satellites.
A bit on the nose, but effective.
It is, right. But it's true, and it shows how much control is concentrated in a handful of hands. So what does all this mean for younger people, for teens and 20-somethings? Gioia is really worried about them because for many, this flattened culture, it's all they've ever known.
They've grown up with it. It's their normal.
Exactly. And he's concerned about how this constant exposure to standardized, often shallow content is shaping their inner lives. And whether it's kind of trapping them in a digital prison controlled by, billionaire wardens who profit from their, well, maybe even their distress.
A bleak outlook, for sure.
It is, right. And it's not just online. Gioia argues that this corporate push for uniformity, it's affecting everything. He talks about the decline of independent artisans, small businesses, the increasing sameness of our towns and cities, even a decline in beauty in our everyday lives.
Yeah, everything's becoming genericized.
Exactly. He even points to corporate logos becoming more and more similar.
Losing their distinctiveness.
Right. And for you, the listener, you're interested in understanding where our culture is going. Gioia gives us really direct advice. If you want to understand the emerging culture, look at the lives of teens and 20-somethings, and especially their digital lives. He's saying, pay attention to them, because they're on the front lines of this shift.
They're the canaries in the coal mine, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about those cultural trends. Gioia mentions this critic, Rebecca Nicholson, and her observation about, how tastes in music, TV, film, they're all kind of converging. It's there's less originality, more repetition. And she wonders if there's some, invisible hand guiding us towards this uniformity. But Gioia, he totally disagrees.
He's not buying the invisible hand theory at all.
Nope. He points directly to the people, He says there are maybe 20 or 30 individuals who are running these major web platforms, entertainment companies, media empires, and they're the ones driving this flattening, he argues. Their influence pushes this standardized content, standardized devices, standardized platforms, and they're the ones, who ultimately control where the money and attention flow.
It's about who's holding the reins, right?
Exactly. And this leads him to believe that there's going to be a backlash. People are going to want something different, something original, something, he calls it a resistance movement against this overwhelming uniformity.
And push for individuality, for authenticity.
Yeah, exactly. He thinks we're seeing the emergence of, two cultures.
Yeah.
The dominant one, which is kind of stagnant, driven by these big corporations, and then this burgeoning counterculture, this underground movement. He even says, it used to be called the resistance, and he thinks that term still applies.
Interesting. So a cultural rebellion brewing.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And this counterculture, it might not have the money, the resources of the big players, but Gioia believes it has something even more powerful, the people. He emphasizes that throughout history, real cultural change has come from the people.
A groundswell of support, of shared desire.
Exactly. And you can really see this in the comments on Gioia's article. A lot of readers, they echo his concerns. They're expressing this desire for alternatives, for something different than this sameness. One commenter, Mark Kernan, he quotes Neil Postman from Amusing Ourselves to Death, about how we're overwhelmed by trivial information, reduced to passivity.
Yeah, that quote about drowning in information but starved for knowledge. I remember that one.
It's incredibly relevant, right? And another commenter, Koba, brings up that speech from the movie Network about how the world is run by corporations. And so many people feel that's become prophetic. The Blockade Chronicles, they also reference Network, quoting that line about wanting to just retreat into our homes, while the world outside goes crazy.
Just wanting some peace and quiet, some normalcy.
Exactly. Digital fatigue, wanting something simpler, something real.
Makes sense.
And a lot of the comments, they focus on this relationship between, art and commerce, this whole issue of flattening. It's tied to that. One commenter, Jim of Seattle, he argues that we're missing the point, that the problem is this reflexive wedding of creative culture with commerce.
So basically, art is too driven by money.
Right. And he suggests, what if we imagine art completely separated from money? Artists who don't rely on their art for income, they might be more likely to create something truly groundbreaking.
An interesting thought experiment. Though, in the real world, artists need to eat, right?
Yeah, that sparked a lot of debate in the comments. Some people were totally on board with the art for art's sake idea, while others brought up the practicalities of, earning a living, supporting yourself. But that underlying concern about, money influencing art, it's definitely there.
A valid concern, for sure. And we see this playing out in specific fields. Bill Protzman, he talks about how Etsy, which was supposed to be this platform for, independent artisans, it now prioritizes mass-produced goods.
Yeah, pushing out the handmade stuff.
Exactly. And Marge Garcia-Lean, a quilter, she talks about how hard it is to compete with, cheap mass-produced items. Like, they might be cheaper, but they don't last. They don't have that same quality.
It's like we've lost appreciation for craftsmanship.
In a way, yeah. And Robert Mocking, he talks about how he prefers older films because they're more original, more emotionally engaging compared to like these modern streaming series, which can feel formulaic, drawn out.
And Bobby Lime, he takes it even further. He suggests we should just focus on art and entertainment from before the 1980s.
A full-on retreat from the modern.
Right. And he's advocating for, like, engaging in non-digital activities, subverting onlineness by actually being in the real world.
Interesting. So a rejection of the digital altogether.
Well, maybe not completely, but definitely a shift in focus. And there's some really interesting kind of philosophical reflections in the comments, too. Like, Sage M uses this analogy of relief and in the round in sculpture.
I'm not familiar with those terms.
So relief is like a flat carving, attached to a background. And in the round is a sculpture that's fully three-dimensional. And Sage M is using this to talk about how we can resist flattening by, embracing the depth, the multidimensionality of real art, the connection to our physical selves.
So pushing back against flattening means engaging with things that are more tangible, more real.
Exactly. So with all this talk of a flattened internet, a flattened culture, the big question is, can we reverse it? Is it too late?
The million-dollar question.
Right. And the comments, they offer a lot of different perspectives. Jim in Seattle, he's optimistic. He believes in the collective power of independent creators. And he thinks that eventually people will realize that, popularity doesn't equal quality.
Like a return to valuing true artistry over, say, viral trends.
Exactly. And Clint Hayes, he offers a more kind of market-based solution. He thinks that there could be a demand for like truly interesting, unique content.
Yeah.
And that would create a profit motive for it. So basically, boring would become unprofitable.
Capitalism to the rescue, maybe.
And GSE, they have a more practical, user-driven approach. They say that creativity still exists online, but you have to be more active, more discerning. They suggest, finding niche communities, using privacy settings and blocking tools to curate your online experience so you're not bombarded with with all the flattened stuff.
Taking control of your own algorithm in a way.
Right. And they give examples like live stream cooking shows, visual artists on Instagram, dedicated book websites. Like those are places where you can find genuine connection, creativity.
So pockets of resistance already exist.
Yeah, exactly. But then Valentina Sertic, they bring up a really important point. Can we really have true community in this digitally abundant landscape?
Like, is it even possible to connect meaningfully amidst all the noise?
Right. And John Tanner, he's a bit more critical. He argues that big tech has basically flattened the great talent of artists and monetized it to death. And he even suggests that, maybe content creators need to, organize demand fairer platforms.
A digital workers union, perhaps?
Maybe. It's interesting to think about it. And then Palestra, they actually have a dissenting opinion. They argue that the lack of standardization on the web is, a problem. That creativity and learning, they thrive in stable, predictable environments.
But the chaos of the internet is actually stifling, not liberating.
Right. It shows how complex this issue is.
Right.
Well, one person sees it liberating, another person sees it as chaotic, hindering.
Different perspectives, different needs.
Exactly. And then there are the commenters who are calling for action. Like Van Damehalen, they ask, where can I find this counterculture, this underground movement? And Victoria, they suggest going to local farmers markets.
A very tangible, real-world solution.
Right. And Bobby Lime, they emphasize, again, subverting onlineness by being in the real world. And Rob Camper, he offers this interesting perspective. He sees Jesus as the OG of counterculture.
Now, that's a take I wasn't expecting.
Right. But I guess, in a way, kind of fits. And finally, EEOC, they offer this really grounded advice. They say, we just need to try, knowing things might fall apart, but with the hope that they might just work.
So basically, keep experimenting, keep pushing for change, but be realistic about it.
Exactly. And, even though Gioia raises all these concerns in his article, he ends on a hopeful note. He says he hopes that by his next State of the Culture address, he'll be able to talk about a culture that's refusing to stay flattened.
So he believes that we can fight back against this trend.
He does. He has faith in human creativity, in our ability to resist. So as we wrap up this deep dive here on Two Robots Talking, we hope this exploration of, Ted Gioia's ideas about the flattening of the internet has been, valuable, giving you some food for thought. We've looked at how the internet's changed, how this flattening is affecting us, and whether there's any hope for something different.
A lot to unpack, for sure.
It is, right. But hopefully we've done it in a way that's, engaging, digestible. So here's a final thought for you, our listener.
Yeah.
Think about all these forces that are driving this flattening and all the examples of resistance that we've discussed. What's one small thing that you can do this week to cultivate more unflattened experiences in your own life, whether online or offline?
It can be anything, no matter how small. Every little bit counts.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on Two Robots Talking. And keep thinking about this flattening thing, what it means for you and what your role in this potential resistance might be. Until next time.
Take care.
See ya.